All right. Our objectives for today, as we learn about recyclable and reusable resources, are to describe and define recyclable resource, define and describe reusable resource, and to talk about other methods of reducing your waste output. In case you couldn't tell, this unit is all about sustainability. So first, let's talk about reusing materials. If you want something to be classified as a reusable resource, then we're talking about using this material over and over again, but in its original form. Doesn't necessarily mean for its original purpose, but in its original form. We don't have to do any reprocessing of this material in order to use it again. Some good examples. If you have a jar of pickles in your fridge, you finish it, you rinse out the jar, and you take that jar and you put it out in your garage, and then when you start, wanting to put all your loose screws and nails and things away, you sort them into jars that you have repurposed. That would be reuse. We don't have to change anything about the jar, but we can use it again. You can also just reuse a material for its intended purpose. A good example of this would be buying used clothes or getting hand-me-downs from family. Okay, still using the clothes as clothes, but they're getting another go-round. Means nothing has to be reprocessed. I can still just wear the t-shirt, but I didn't have to go out and harvest the materials to make a new t-shirt in order to wear it. Similar thing going on here if you use a reusable water bottle instead of just getting a new single-use plastic water bottle every time you want to drink water from the bottle. Same purpose, being used again and again and again, so you're reducing how much waste you're producing. Other examples, if you are putting a new road in somewhere, rather than, tearing the whole road out all the way down to the dirt and then replacing that with new layers underneath and then a new road surface on top, instead we, mill and work on the road base a little bit, might remove some of it if it's damaged, but leave the rest of it and have that serve as the base for the new pavement that we put on top. Then we save ourselves material. And not only do we save ourselves having to go out and get new materials to put a base in, but we also then don't have to figure out what to do with the removed materials. If we tear up that road base, all of that concrete and asphalt and stuff has to go somewhere, probably a landfill. So it's a good thing to keep it where it is instead. We would classify water as a reusable resource. We know that the amount of water that exists on Earth is in limited quantities, but it is able to be renewed. It doesn't have to be non-renewable. We just have to treat it carefully. We talked about this briefly in the other section of notes that we took. We talked about how the water cycle naturally recycles our water. So the water that, falls as rain, runs off into rivers, it gets evaporated back up into the atmosphere and can fall as rain again. So we're constantly able to reuse it. But when that water becomes polluted through all of the daily tasks we do with water, taking showers, brushing our teeth, watering crops that then have fertilizer put on them, washing our clothes, flushing toilets, all of those things take water and they put contaminants in it that we wouldn't want to still be in that water the next time we try to drink it. So we have to filter it. We have to treat it to make sure that those contaminants are out. So this is an example of what a wastewater facility might look like. You can see it's pretty complicated. There's sort of physical separation of things where we use screens and settling tanks to allow large contaminants to be either removed or to settle out of the water. And then when we've removed those large contaminants, then we have to put it back through where we can add in chemicals that will help remove contaminants that are microscopic, that we wouldn't want to have in the water. So we had reusing a material. Now let's talk about what it looks like to recycle a material. If an item can't be reused as is, but it can be processed in some way and then used again, we would consider that a recyclable material. So some examples. Paper. So you can't reuse, once you have drawn on, typed on, colored on, painted on a piece of paper, you can't reuse that paper for its intended purpose. So instead, if we're going to recycle it, we're going to need to process it in some way. So it's going to get broken down, shredded, then turned back into pulp, and it can be recycled into new paper. You can recycle paper. Same thing for cardboard and glass, metal scraps. Okay. There are lots of communities all across the US that have curbside and or collection programs. We have a collection program. A couple times a month you can drop your recycling off in recycling locations so it can be recycled. Okay. And they collect these materials not just because then they can be reused and we don't have to harvest new materials, but again, like we said before, it prevents them from getting displaced with other waste. If I take my paper and I just throw it in the regular trash, that is more waste that's going to an incinerator or to a landfill, as opposed to it getting recycled. Then it's getting turned back into paper and put back out to be used again. So we have a new product and we have less waste to get rid of. The whole idea of recycling and reusing is to limit waste. You will often see these three words together: reduce, reuse, recycle. So we've talked about reuse and recycle. Now let's talk a little bit about reduce. Okay? Because the problem with the amount of waste that we produce as a country is not just that we need new materials to make those products, but it's also finding out what to do with the waste products that are not being used. Anything that gets used up and thrown out as waste has to be disposed of, and that requires resources and land, usually somewhere to put that waste. So, along with reusing and recycling, we can make other choices to help reduce the amount of waste that we produce. And one of the big choices you can make comes along with packaging. Okay, so looking at the way the things you purchase are packaged actually does matter. If you're buying something that's coming, wrapped in one of those big press and seal plastic packages that are impossible to get open, it's a lot of plastic, and sometimes it's an unnecessary amount of plastic. I'm not saying every piece of packaging out there is unnecessary. We have to think about what we're packaging, right? Food requires different packaging, especially if it's going to spoil. Clothing requires packaging for specific sanitary reasons. So you have to think about that too when you're designing packaging and when you're choosing packaging. But if you have an option to purchase something that comes with less packaging on it, you will wind up reducing the volume of waste that you produce. All right, that is the end of our notes for today.